Cody, you know you're going to be a college coach, college this, a high school coach this, you know. Well, it all comes from the simple fact that his dad was everybody that we know in Burlington, North Carolina's coach. So everybody looks at Cody like, hey, like you have to be like, you know, you got to get something from your dad. And Cody's like always like, yeah, like I love being a coach. I want to be broadcasting. I want to do with anything that has to do with sports. But I guess that's just part of him because of how he grew up with his dad being a coach, you know. So definitely compares a lot.
Yeah, I'd say that it like similar to what you said. It's Mike. It's one of those things where like it just comes natural because that's all you see. And then similar to like you brought up the point about you didn't want to put some like your dad or mom in a position where they got to answer for something you did. And it's the same thing. It's like when your dad's like a big pillar of the community, like you're always, you know, cognizant of, hey, I can't be out here doing this. My image is everything. You know what I mean? And you still want to have fun and hang out with your friends. But also at the end of the day, you don't want somebody else, their name having to be, you know, drug around because of something you did that was foolish. So, and then, you know, growing up, like Will touched on it. I mean, I went to probably every college in the ACC, like a lot of the SEC schools. I mean, it was just something we did, like met a bunch of college coaches, bunch of famous people. It was something that like, you know, people would go with us and they're like, oh man, like we're really out here. Like I'm seeing Golden Tate play at Notre Dame. And I'm sitting here like, well, I've seen him twice already, you know, like it was just something that like until later on, I didn't really appreciate like the opportunities I was being given. I was like, a lot of people aren't fortunate enough to be able to do that week in and week out. So I definitely agree with everything you said.
And I think to that point too, in a way, it normalizes it in a way that's healthy, right? Because it reminds you like you get to see these people as just people. For a lot of other people, athletes and everyone are put in a pedestal, and until you're in those experiences, or like Will's talking about being in a locker room, like you see them as real people and you realize, all right, they're special because they have a great skill, but they're no better or worse than I am as a person and all that. And so being comfortable in those environments, I think is such a huge advantage because you start to just push past that initial layer of, oh my God, it's so-and-so in this situation.
Definitely agree with that. So talk a little, Mike, I want to hear a little bit about like, and I know our fans do as well, the decision to go to Notre Dame. You know, your dad went to Notre Dame. Your brother also played at Notre Dame. What went into like your recruiting process and, you know, growing up in Connecticut and playing football there?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I always say, because like I'm the oldest of three, and like you said, my younger brother played tight end for us at Notre Dame, was a year and a half behind me. My younger sister swam at Notre Dame there on scholarship. She was 5 years younger than me. My dad played ball there. Both of his brothers played ball there. Like we were in it. And when we first started getting recruited, you know, I was going into my sophomore, junior year of high school. My dad sat us down and he's like, just because I went to Notre Dame doesn't mean you guys have to go to Notre Dame. Like, this is your decision. You need to go around and find the place that fits best for you in all this as this starts to pick up. The problem with him saying that is they had basically swaddled us in blue and gold since we were kids, and the brainwashing had been so thorough so early on in this that there was no place I ever really wanted to go otherwise in that. But, you know, you don't take it for granted, and that was the one thing is I never knew if that scholarship offer was going to come or not. And so you work hard, you take other visits, and, you know, you had coaches coming by high school and all that stuff, which is, it's fun and it's humbling because it's a show of all your hard work. But when that Notre Dame scholarship offer came, I was the first commitment in my class. My brother was the first commitment in his class. Like, we knew that was where we wanted to be. That was always the goal in mind, even if I was never going to say it out loud, because I wanted to, you know, make sure I was looking around and giving other schools a fair shot at this. But I had just been going to campus at Notre Dame for 2 games a year from third grade on. It felt like home. And then once I got on campus and started to meet the guys that were going to be my teammates and all that, meet the guys in the current O-line room, talk to who was going to be my coach at the time, like, you get comfortable with that group and you say, all right, I have a place that feels like home. I would be going to a place that means a lot to my family, and I could go to work with a bunch of guys that are like-minded, that are going to push me to be better in all the ways that I want to be. Like, those things ended up really putting it across the finish line.
Yeah, for sure. And that's crazy that you say that, because like, I feel like that's like, you know, for a young man growing up, like, you can say however your father can say however much he wants to say about how, don't follow my footsteps, be better than me. But at the end of the day, you really truly want to be him. So therefore, this is the first step to being better than him, is starting where he started. And especially as a young child, you know, you always grow up wanting to be with like your father, especially when your father does the things that you really love dearly too, such as football and analysts and stuff like that, So I definitely understand where you're coming from of just like, it was your decision, but it was put in front of you your whole life. So you were already in love with Notre Dame. You didn't have no other choice but going to Notre Dame, really, because you really truly loved it, And it was weird because me and Cody talk about, I was a Duke fan in basketball, hands down. But in football, coming into my freshman year in high school, sophomore year in high school, I knew I was going to UNC, Chapel Hill. It was hands down, I was going to UNC. It wasn't because I like UNC. Like I said, I was a Duke basketball fan, so it had nothing to do with that. It was more because I was around the people at UNC. I was introduced to the people at UNC. UNC would step out of their way to do things for me. But then it changed when Fedora and them came into UNC, and then kind of they were asking for stuff out of me rather than them giving me stuff. For instance, me and Cody mentioned it in other podcasts. UNC came and they wanted me to work out for them, and I had 6, 7, 8 different offers. Miami, LSU, Auburn, all these huge schools, and UNC came to my high school and asked me to work out for them. That's what threw me off the road with UNC. But I honestly could say if it wasn't for that, then I felt like I would have probably ended up at UNC just because I was around them. They were brought to me a lot. I was getting gear from them. My coach loved UNC. Cody was a UNC fan. I was at UNC every other weekend for a football game. Like, it's just kind of like brought upon you without you even wanting it to be in a way.
Well, and that's the crazy part is like people, and a lot fewer people say it now because they've realized it's not true. They're like, well, you're committing to a school, you're not committing to a coach or anything like that. And it's like, it's hard to separate those things after a while because so much of whatever coach is on campus at the time is going to dictate how that school is brought to you. And so that stuff does matter, and it changes for a lot of guys, no doubt.
Yeah, sure. Definitely does.
So, Mike, when you get to Notre Dame, talk a little bit about, your playing career there. You played with some pretty big name guys.
Yeah. It was weird when I got to Notre Dame. I was a late bloomer. Like, I was a guy that came to campus and, I was a, 275-pound freshman who had to get to a college weight room, who had to get in that strength and conditioning program and build myself up. But it still took all the way until my true senior year to really crack that lineup. I ended up starting 17 games. Like, I ended up getting lucky and, sticking around for a really good year at the end. But for a lot of my college career, we were a 6, 7, 8 win team at best. Went through a coaching change after my sophomore year. I came in under Charlie Weiss as our head coach. And then I had Brian Kelly, who's the current head coach for the last 3 years I was there. Will, you can appreciate this. I had 4 offensive line coaches in 5 years, which is a doozy.
Tough in college. That's super tough in college. I had 2. Yeah. And it was difficult, but it was right at the point where, like, okay, it was just good enough. But 4? I couldn't imagine.
4 and 5 years, man. So, like, every spring going in and learning someone's new tweaks on technique and all that stuff, and
you could never
trying to build that relationship.
You could never get you could never get a perfect technique under your belt. You know how it is at offensive lineman. If you got 4 different coaches, I guarantee all 4 of those coaches have a different way of short setting. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
oh yeah,
like stuff
and,
like
well,
that.
And you know what
matters.
And you know what, for me, like, I got super fortunate is I had a lot of really good coaches there. And it's sort of, I always told myself is, well, it gets you ready potentially for what you're going to face on Sundays, especially for me, who was going to be a journeyman trying to make it in the NFL, is you got to quickly come in, assimilate to what they want to do. And you could get cut and have to deal with a bunch of different coaches. But I was fortunate to have some really good ones. I mentioned, like, I wouldn't trade my experience for the world. I would have loved to have played more there, but I had such a great room of guys, like you guys said, playing with Zach Martin, who's going to be a walk-in Hall of Famer one day. There were 4 other draft picks on our offensive line over that course in time. Manti Te'o was on that defense. Stephon Tuitt, who plays for the Steelers now. We got a bunch of guys all over the league at this point that did so well there, and it culminated that last year, 2012. We were undefeated in the regular season. We got our asses kicked by Alabama in the national title game that year, which sucked. But, like, it was just going through all the rest of those seasons as like a kind of 500 team made that last season stand out so much. I had the best college football coach I've ever had in my entire life, my best coach on any level outside of my dad, and Harry Heastand, who was the Bears offensive line coach last year as well, but was at Notre Dame putting out Zach Martin and his brother Nick, who's with the Texans, Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, Quentin Nelson. Like, he was the one birthing all these first rounders out of there because he was the best technical coach I'd ever been around. He was so passionate about all that. And so getting to like meet those people along the way now that, some of my teammates who, whose kids I'm a godparent to, whose kids call me Uncle Mike, and then to get to run into a coach like that legitimately, changed the way I look at the position of offensive line, changed the way I look at how I approach work every day. Like meeting those people along the way was definitely the best part of, that journey of football at Notre Dame.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. And I'm pretty sure you kind of incorporated what you learned from each of those coaches into your game somehow, And I've realized coming to the NFL, I came in my rookie year, and I ended up – our offensive line coach my rookie year ended up getting fired. And then going into last year, I had a new offensive line coach. And then coming into this year, we ended up keeping our offensive line coach. So if we wouldn't have, that would have been my third offensive line coach in 3 years. And you know how it is as a young guy in the NFL. It's good to know different ways to do things, but I want to be that Bruce Lee. I want to know that one set. I want to practice that one set 1,000 times and to know 1,000 or 4 different types of sets, So my biggest thing is with this year, I love the fact that we got Coach Warhawk back with the Jags because it's an offensive lineman, and I'm pretty sure it's like this for a lot of different positions, but changing position coaches really can change your technique a lot, and it can change your game because – and I say this especially as a young guy because my coach told me this. He says the way they look at it as an offensive line coach is you get a young guy in the NFL, you can switch up some of the ways that he moves, some of his techniques. But you go and you get an 8-year vet in the NFL, you can't really change much of what he does. He does what he does, how he does it. And you might can switch up little things within his feet and stuff like that, but you can never switch up how he plays, So that's the thing I'm actually glad of in the NFL is that I've had a chance to see 2 different offensive line coaches and kind of get the perspectives of both,
Yeah, Coach Warhop's an awesome coach too. I only met him briefly. I did a workout down when he was at Tampa Bay with the Bucks down there, but I had a buddy who was with him for a little bit as well and spoke super highly of him. So he seems like a great guy and a great offensive line coach.
Yes, sir. He definitely is, for sure. He definitely is.
So, hey, Mike, while we're on the topic, talk a little bit about that Alabama national title game. What was it? What was it like going into it? They were like a dynasty at the time, or still are. What was that game like?
Yeah, what was crazy is we look back on the Alabama dynasty and people talk about the 2011-2012 repeat version of them. It's like some of the best guys there. And going into that game, like, we didn't look at that team like that. Like, people always ask, and like, this is the most insulting question. They're like, did you expect to really win in that game? And I said, shit, yeah, we were 12-0. We were really good. Our whole defense was NFL guys over there. We had the best defense in college football. Like, hell yeah, we thought we were going to win. Now, hell yeah, we were wrong. Like, we did not win or come even close. But, it's one of those things like going into it. C.J. Mosley was the middle linebacker on that defense. Ha-Ha Clinton-Dix was on the back end. Like, they had some dudes on there for sure, but we looked at them and like everyone else, like everyone else sees the helmet and Saban and, the years of tradition out there. I looked over there and I said, all right, like there's Damian Square. He plays 3 technique, like Quentin Dial's playing defensive end over there. Like this is what he does. CJ's going to call out all this stuff. And you just break it down and it's like, all right, like they're guys like everyone else. Like like they're college football players. They're really good ones. But like I blocked Stephon Tuitt during 2-minute drill every Thursday for us in practice. Like you're not going to find a lot of dudes better than that. And he's borne that out on Sundays. So getting ready for it, I've never rolled into a football game feeling more prepared. Like college football's got that 40-day break, or it did, between the end of the regular season and the BCS title game in that. And so you've seen every tape twice, 3 times over the course of that. You've walked through everything. You've dialed through all of it. Like, it like the back of your hand. It's just we didn't execute well enough, and we didn't capitalize well enough on opportunities early in that game. And it's one of those things that when you're going up against a team that, had more quality depth and top-end talent than us, for sure, especially on offense, you look at that situation, it's, all right, you better capitalize on those 2 or 3 opportunities to make a big play in the beginning of the game, or else, the better team is going to win out and all that. The thing I really hold against is freaking Kansas State, who would have been number 1 that year had they not lost to some BS team, that really bad Baylor team, because we would have walked all over them in that title game.
That was the shit. That was it.
That was Colin Klein. He was a Heisman Trophy candidate.
Number 7.
Number 7, yep. Baylor team. I'll never forget this my whole life. So we were number 3 in the country, and we were watching Oregon. I think Oregon was number 2, and they were playing Stanford.